Hey, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. And today is actually a special session. It's out of band. As you know, it's Festive Tech Calendar. And I have actually the first time speaker on the Festive Tech Calendar. He's actually a great presenter, being honest, but it's his first touch on this event. Jason Keplinger. So welcome to this session, and thank you for being co-presenter with me on this session. It's my honor here. And for all the viewers who are here, before kicking off this session, I want to say that thank you for organizers of the Festive Tech Calendar, especially Azure Greg, and we have Richard, who are organizing this. And there's a great Cloud family community who is doing this all together. So it's a real pleasure to be here. I believe it's my third or fourth consecutive, kind of event every year, which I'm trying to attend. But each year I'm trying to bring different people into this event to make sure that we spread the joy and we can share it all together. Before we start, actually, I have a very important announcement here.
Wow.
Santa actually is not going to arrive to our studio today, so
Yeah.
that's a bummer. But there's a promise. He's going to come during the Christmas Eve, and our responsibility today is actually to make sure that we can share some technical details how elves in Santa's factory can use this FinOps magic, I would say, in a workshop that they can optimize the cost so that they can, deliver more goods and presents to the kids around the world. I hope that's not that's kind of a great cause that will keep our spirit going on.
It definitely would carry us through the presentation.
Yes. All right. So I hope everybody's excited. Let's dive into that. So without any further ado, to you, Jason. Please go
Thank
ahead.
you. Thank you, Elhan. And it's great joining you here today, right before the holiday, and talking about Santa's workshop and really just talking about FinOps in general, too. So, my background is I am the Chief Technology and Innovations Officer for T-Rex, and I've worked on a lot of our large programs. In fact, implementing a lot of the FinOps in our programs. I'm managing over $100 million worth of sales within different cloud environments, too. So, we'll talk a little bit about some of the experience and some of the things we've seen. I'll turn it back
Great.
over to you, Elhan.
Awesome. Yeah, Jason is very modest in his introduction. Actually, he has a big baggage of accomplishments, but that was very modest introduction. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll try to keep it as modest as you were, in my presentation, as probably some of the audience already know me. I'm a founder of the Cloud Marathoner, Microsoft MVP and MCT, and as well as regional lead for the MCTs across the United States. And I actually have a good news. So it has been renewed. So I'm going to be your MCT regional lead for another year. That's honor and happiness that came by the end of the year as well. And you know, I have present on different things, but I don't want to take too much time. Please visit my post on the LinkedIn as well as on Cloud Marathoner blogs. Get connected with me on LinkedIn and GitHub. I'm going to share some of the code. So without any further ado, let's dive into our session and see what we are going to cover today. So first of all, for some of you, you may never heard about FinOps, or maybe you heard something, but you are not sure what it is and why you would need that. So you'll start with that introduction from the experience that Jason is bringing from the corporate world. That's, I believe, very to the topic, to the target, I would say, information that you would hear, firsthand from the person who's actually doing that. Then you are going to learn how to do the FinOps. There are different ways how you can do that, but there are wrong or right ways. I don't know. We are going to learn in this session. Then, of course, as I'm a big fan of Azure, which is not a surprise to you, we'll look into some practical ways how you can apply FinOps concepts in Azure and what Azure actually offers to help you with FinOps. And then, of course, we cannot pass this presentation without demo. So we are going to use some of the automation magic, some of the Azure portal demonstration to give you some practical knowledge so that you can go and hone on the skills that you want to have with your FinOps experiences. And without any overdue, let's start with the first part. Please, Jason.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Elhan. And um, just like Elhan, we have a lot of good engineers on our our team as far as T-Rex is concerned. But Elhan's one of those stars that we have out there. He's definitely out there a lot talking about these things, and really appreciate you bringing me in and being able to talk a little bit about FinOps and some of the stuff we're doing too. So first, T-Rex is a mid-tier company. T-Rex has been around 25 years plus years, so a lot of years out there in the GovCon space. Um, we primarily do modernization and security, securing critical federal systems, IT systems. So that's a lot of the work you see on the left-hand side here, which is engineering services, customer experience, and health IT. We have a track record of that includes running the 2020 census, which I can talk a little bit about as we go through this, is one of our key programs that we ran. Quite a big FinOps operation in that one too. And we deliver secure, reliable solutions to our customer experience, health IT, and IT engineering across the defense, intelligence, and civil agencies. So what you see on the right-hand side here is also a lot at the bottom is where we're connected into a lot of the partners, and especially the cloud partners, that we have quite a good relationship with those partners. But what I would like to say is, if you're interested, reach out to us. Always looking for great engineers like Elhan and connecting with you. So we'll jump into now talking about FinOps. If we want to go to the next chart. So let's dive into unlocking cloud savings with FinOps. First, let's talk about why. Why is this so important? Not just for Santa, but for also us. Why is it important for us too? Well, first is cloud has created this new environment where you're not in a data center anymore. You have variable cost. So cloud allows us to be flexible, pay-as-you-go pricing, reduce provisioning and waste over time. So you see a variable cost over time, and you need to monitor that. You also have immediate procurement of resources. In the past, you had to wait months to get resources or weeks to get resources. Now you can instantly get them, and this is accelerating development and innovation, but it's also accelerating cost in some cases too. Also, the cloud environment allows us to allocate costs. So more granular tracking, being able to provide detailed insight and precise cost control. So that is why you want it. Now let's talk about what is it. So it's always a bad word sometimes, is a framework. But it is a framework. That's what FinOps is, because you can handle a lot of different ways. You can handle with a bunch of different tools. But it is a framework that's in place, that you put in place so that you can elevate your cost control of your organization and address all those things on the left-hand side. So first is collaboration and optimization. Collaboration is key in this, and we'll talk about adoption and collaboration a lot throughout this presentation. It's getting visibility, seeing things, making sure you know where the efficiencies are, and addressing those efficiencies quickly. Second is accountability or cost visibility. This is insight into how the spend is occurring. Where is it occurring? Who's occurring that spend? Are you over budget? Are you under budget? And Alon's going to talk about budgets a little bit later too, is making sure when you clip that budget level that it gets addressed too. Or are you trending towards a budget clip? Real-time decision-making supports quick and informed choices so that you can make choices quickly and change things as you go on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, or you're looking at it on a monthly basis too. The fourth thing there is standardization, ensuring consistency in the process. And Alhan's going to talk about how you automate this later, how we really put it in place so that you make sure things are consistent and standardized. But there's also things like FinOps.org, which really developed a standard that's being used across cloud providers called Focus. And that allows the data to come out in a standard way too, so that you can analyze it across cloud environments too. And then the bad word at the bottom, governance. Everybody hates governance, but that's part of this, and that helps us there too, is maintain control and compliance over those things, especially if you're working in the federal space. It's making sure you're in compliance and governance with those agencies. Okay. Next
So
chart.
before we go to the next chart, I have a question about that. So you mentioned about a framework, right? That's actually shared across the cloud solution providers, and its name is Focus, right? So what's the special in Focus framework that you think that it's driving the industry standard? What was that, I would say, what is that special value it provides?
So the special thing it provides is now other outside third-party tools
Hmm.
can start using the data in a consistent way instead. Before it was coming out in all different, the fields were different, what kind of information was provided was different, and this allows you to standardize across cloud environments and get more of a standard view across those multi-cloud environments because a lot of our customers are going to multi-cloud environments. So you want to standardize the data so that when you pull it together, you have a lot of the same data elements between each cloud provider that they're providing in their cost information.
Yes. And when you
And
speak, yeah, just to add into that, when you speak about this, standardization, what come to my mind is that there are like different vendors that are also in this FinOps field, which actually use this standardization as a leverage, right? So that they can have this
yes,
more optimal solution to customers. And there are like different, I think, partnership that we have as a T-Rex with those FinOps companies where we want to bring solid solutions to our customers in a way that we don't have to go through this, when the same wheel, right? In terms of, finding out what will work for the customer, what will not, and where we'll hit some bumps on our road.
yeah, you're
Back to
you're
you.
totally you're totally right. That hits it on the nail on the head is basically in the past you had to build your own solution and you're
Right.
pulling the data in from all these different cloud environments. There's a lot of third-party vendors that we work with right now that use Focus to help pull that data together across those cloud environments, and then they don't have to do a lot of translation of the data. It's coming out in the Focus format so that they can reuse that across clouds, and you're seeing a lot of the same information then across clouds too.
Yeah, that's great. Next.
So next, talking about a little bit deeper into the FinOps model on the left-hand side. I know Elon will talk about this a little bit more too later on, but there's really three steps into it. There's the inform, optimize, and operate steps. And pretty much everybody uses these same steps when you look across vendors, you look across cloud providers. Inform is really about awareness and allocation. Awareness, raising visibility into the usage of the cloud, who's using what and how are they using it. Allocation is how you're assigning costs across those appropriate teams and projects. And there's things that you have to think about when you're going into that inform phase is how you're going to set up your cost associated with that. Because in a lot of cases, you have shared resources in some cases. So how do you allocate shared resources? So there's a lot to think about in the inform phase to think about how you're going to allocate costs, not just the cost of the project, but also those shared resources that might be separate. Um, Second step is optimize. This is efficiency and savings. So efficiency focusing on resource utilization and reducing the waste associated with that. And that can be done in a lot of ways. And I know you have some demos about how you can look at that and try to figure out where your waste might be. Savings is aiming at trying to take those cost reductions through smarter resource management. Can you spend things down over time? Does it always have to be up? How much is the size of the resource you're using correct for the workload that you need? So all those things come into play there as far as savings is concerned. The third thing is operate. And again, I'll use that term that I hate to use is governance. But governance, ensuring consistent management and compliance over the cloud resources, making sure you're deploying them in the same way so that, especially in the government environment, you need an ATO. Are you doing everything the same way? Making sure that you have the same tags, the same approach to it, so that even the security environment, and that's all the communication we talked about earlier, a lot of communication has to occur. So as much of that as you can automate, the better off you are. The second is accountability, and this is how do you make sure that people are financially responsible for the things that they've spun up. You don't want people going rogue and spinning up a whole bunch of environments and not being financially responsible for those and accountable for those. So you handle that in the operate side. The fourth bubble in the center there, adoption, is one of the key things that T-Rex really thinks about is adoption of everything. One of the keys to adoption we've seen of cloud is visibility. This FinOps. FinOps is one of those key things is people want to know where their resources are, how they're being built, how much are they being charged for it, how does it compare to what they had before, where is their budget? A lot of that drives that step there, which is really the adoption. And I'm talking about also in here, what we do is a lot of education and training too. You have to put a lot of education and training out there to your end users to tell them how to read the reports, how to know what they're doing there. Also the visibility of the dashboards that you create so that they can see their budgeting, see their information, and that helps you collaborate across these teams. And then finally, continuous improvement, continuing to improve the process over time across all these bubbles, because this is a cycle. You're going to continue to do this over and over again and get more efficient over time. On the
Yes.
right-hand side, where do we start? There, I would say always start with an assessment. Figure out where you're at. You got to figure out where you're at to figure out where you're going. One of the key things there is Azure has its own FinOps assessment tool. You
Yes.
can go through there. It's got a great interface. You can go through and check through everything. You can do it multiple times because in some cases you have multiple applications. Some may be more advanced in FinOps than others. So I would recommend doing it often. And actually, what we look at doing it is every quarter, making sure that you understand how you're progressing as far as your FinOps assessment is concerned. It helps you understand maturity, you identify gaps, and then you can build plans in place in order to address those gaps that you're finding and advance your FinOps approach over time. So where can we help? Usually T-Rex can help on this. We've done FinOps assessments of maturity to figure out where you're at and help build plans to get to new places. Automate the FinOps process, making sure, and we'll talk about tagging and some of the other things, making sure you get that into your automation process. Accelerating your FinOps journey, making sure that we can figure out how to build a plan that can get you there faster. And then finally, optimizing your data center and your cloud too, is making sure FinOps can also be done not just in the cloud, but also can consider your data center. So you can merge the data across the two so you can figure out where you might find efficiencies, not just in the cloud, but other areas too.
I'll have a tricky question here because
Yeah.
every time we are speaking about adoption, there's always, some resistance to the change, right? And when you bring the FinOps as for the people who have been operating in a data center and, managing these bombs, right? We call them bomb, bill of material and all other things. So it's a big change in terms of, how they are going to operate, right? How they want to understand the system. So what was the ways that you find it's to make this adoption easier and make the customers to understand it in a way that there's less resistant for the change?
Yeah, I would say education's key and also getting out there and talking about it. We did a lot of what we called road shows for adoption. We went out there, we presented, kind of like what we're doing right here, presented to the customer, talked them through it, but also provide them the advantage of going and learning on their own too. So one is opening up the lab so that they can go see the interface so they can see what data is coming in, but also giving them resources, educational resources that they can learn on their own. Because I know if you're like me, a lot of times, great, I went and saw the presentation, I talked through it, but then I want to go learn on my own too, and I want to go touch it and see it. So I think getting out there, talking about it as much as possible, introducing it, but also getting them hands-on and also giving them the resources to learn on their own too.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah. Presenting something means that you need to learn it twice so that you know what you're presenting. So
not just twice.
Sometimes it's more iteration than twice.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. So that's actually really good. And another thing is that for the customers, what I found is that if they don't know that, of course they would be a bit suspicious and they would not have a trust. They would not trust the process. But through this education, being transparent, showing the dashboard, showing the, cost savings and how it's going to manage for them and how they are going to save in the process, that would, bright out their days, and that's the way to win your customers, I would say, right?
Yeah, it's like a present at Christmas, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. It's like decorating your, evergreen tree, right?
Yes.
In the beginning, when you start, it's not attractive at all. But once you finish the process, everything is shining, everything is beautiful.
It looks good. Yeah, you got that picture of where you want to get to by the end of it.
Great. Yeah. All right. Awesome. That's great analogy there. Let's continue here. So thank you, Jason, going through that, different concepts in FinOps and as well as this framework called Focus. And plus, you still kind of thunder that I was trying to give this Azure FinOps assessment. We are also going to provide the link there. But anyway, thank you. And most of these concepts you already covered, but I'm going to focus more to cover that from from Azure perspective, from practical perspective, and as you mentioned already, accountability, driving the accountability is actually the first step that you want to start with FinOps. And what it means basically understanding what are you spending on, and and why you are spending on, right? And here's the thing: spending money on resources is fine as far as you are getting revenue out of it, right? So if you are spending and your revenue is growing, that's a great trajectory that you want to be in there, because you are utilizing the services, you are getting the revenue out of it, you are getting the good services out of it. But whenever your spend grows and you don't see any value that's coming out of it, that's where accountability and these FinOps tools make sure that you have this good way seeing what's going on and put the brakes or make adjustments, so to speak, optimization before it's too late and your budget is gone. So driving accountability is great. It's very good to grow your business. It's great to know what resource you are using, where you are using them, and what's the value to our customers. So that's where we emphasize that again and again. Next thing here, we have visibility, right? So you want to have visibility into accountability, and the best one of the good ways is to have and to know the cost management, right? There are different tools in Azure that you can use in cost management, including some custom views. There are reports. There are different ways how you can slice the cost utilization and see what resources are actually consuming the cost, which is fine. If those resources and if those resources and workloads are bringing the value to your customers by generating revenue, by making the sales and stuff like that, it means that's what they're supposed to be doing. But whenever you see that there's less value out of the uh, you know resources, or they need to be actually deprovisioned, because there's a life cycle to any cloud resource that we are provisioning. And whenever the time is right, it's actually called secure hygiene, meaning that you have to deprovision those resources in a proper manner that, according to your customer guidelines and compliances that they are following. Next thing, we call about cost management, governance, and Azure policy, right? Again, we come to that word governance, which Jason actually hate to say about, but wherever you look, governance will come across you. You can run out of it. And in Azure, from practical perspective, what we have there is we talk about management groups, subscriptions, and resource group hierarchy. That's where this access control, the budget is actually defined. And as you might be familiar with Azure, with the subscription concept in Azure, we don't just talk about the budget and the money part of it, but it's also about it's about the certain it's about getting this certain quota, right, for resources that you can use. For example, there is some quota on how many storage accounts you can run in one subscription, and it might be soft or hard quota you can hit, but understanding that whatever subscription or account that you are using for your customers to solution, it's a boundary which can give you some budgeting, the cost element, and as well as the quota, how much resource you can utilize there. And to drive your governance, of course, you need to have some specific metadata, and tagging strategy is very important to have in place for your for your resources to drive the insights about the cost and reporting. And especially when in a certain scenarios where you may have your customer may have one subscription with a dozen of workloads that are running there. At that point, having the proper tagging strategy is the way to report the cost on each workload, to see which ones are so that the accountability is actually there, and your customers and you understand where is the spend, where is the money going, and are you getting value out of the spend. And again, we talked about structure, right? Management groups, subscription, resource groups. You need to have this structure in a way that your business dictates. For example, do you want to have your subscription based on business units or geographical locations where they are located? Or maybe you want to structure your subscriptions for your customers based on different environments where those workloads are running. So these are all considerations that are coming into that pipeline. And I'm going to show you example of enforcing tagging based on inheritance. That's will basically free you up from worrying about that. Would this developer or would this system owner put the appropriate tags when they're creating a new resource? And
So
of course, yes,
one
please.
one thing on this too is I wanted to ask you is what do you think is the connection between like a DevSecOps platform or DevOps platform and FinOps? Do you see it highly connected, highly integrated? What do you think about that?
That's a tough question, but DevSecOps, DevOps, I see them as one. It's just in one of them, you need to, as any organization in 21st century, we need to be security focused. So you cannot just take security and put that in a silo and say that I will handle it separate. So that's why, from that perspective, your operations and security, from my understanding, it needs to be one. And you cannot just operate your cloud environment without understanding the cost and implication of the spend, right? So that's where FinOps comes. So I would say these are the three magic, as you mentioned, three magic concepts and three magic guidelines that you need to have in your project to succeed. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's what I've seen too is yeah, FinOps has to be part of that triangle of DevSecOps too. And DevSecOps plays a huge part in how you implement your FinOps too, because you'll talk about it in a little bit of how much you can automate tagging and things like that as far as deployment, where you deploy things and how you tag them based upon putting that into your DevSecOps pipeline. So it's definitely, I would say, highly integrated together. And that's why FinOps is all huge about communication too, communication with
Yes,
those other teams too.
definitely. Yes. That's great. And then, of course, whenever you deal with the system, you need to have some monitoring, some observability tooling in place. And Microsoft Azure actually provides very good tooling where you can utilize some canned reports that are coming out of the box. We are going to look at them under the cost management demo that's coming up next. And you can actually pull the data, cost data from APIs, and further analyze them with some maybe custom tools or third-party vendors or partners that you're working together to get some deeper picture into what's happening in your resources, where is the spend, and what's the trajectory there, right? So where you are going, what's the forecast? Um, Monitoring and also brings a strong accountability because once you can see something and you can measure, then you can know where you are going, so that and who is having that spend, and you can drive this accountability on resources, why they are there, where is revenue is coming from, and is there a waste, right? How you can prevent the waste from uh, you know and by preventing waste, what I'm alluding to is basically resources that have been provisioned, but nobody is using them. There's like very low utilization, or or maybe you just forgot about that. you know, it also happens from time to time. It's like
Yeah.
it's like very basic concepts of cloud when you come, right? You don't want to have water always open and running in your house because you know that you can get into flooding, you can get into damage, and you don't want your water bill to come in a way that it can bankrupt you, right? That's another way to look at it.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's those presents that fall off the production line in the
yes,
Santa's workshop. You can't find them;
yes,
they're under the table. And I was going to mention that, and that's where security really plays into this too. Is we've seen in the past where you can find rogue assets, assets that are out there, and not rogue because they're nefarious, but
yeah.
assets that were created and people forgot about. You can find them through your FinOps process also too.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, and part of it is also budgeting and creating alerts, right? To alert you and make sure that there's actually somebody is watching for those alerts, so that they can drive awareness and visibility into trending forecasts, what's going to happen or what's actually happening at the moment. And of course, you can use in our demo, I will show you. You can use the filters by using those tags in a way that you can find what are the specific resources that what's the money that you are spending on those specific project resources. You can definitely slice and dice that. And cost optimization, right? So once you know where you are spending your money, once you know what are the resources you own, then you can start about cost optimization. And there's actually a number of good tools that you can use in Azure. The traditional, I will talk about traditional ones and then new ones. So traditional ones usually with Azure Advisor, right, which is a great tool. It's actually AI driven because it's analyze your resource and provide you different recommendations where you can reduce the cost or better secure your workloads. There's also resource reservations and different ways how you can save on the and optimize your cost. But the new way, Jason, I think it may not be surprise for most of you, but it's kind of new thing, generally speaking. It's using the Copilot to understand how and where you spend your money within your Azure budget. And I'll show that, I tried it earlier in my demo environment of subscriptions. I wasn't too much impressed with the responses, being honest, but it was better than nothing. So I would say so. There's still some work for Copilot to be done. Being honest, this is
That's
kind of
awesome.
feedback to Microsoft. I was not impressed, but it is better than nothing. I would say, yeah. That's where
That's
we are.
awesome.
Yeah. Any questions here, or we can move to the next one, to the demo?
No, no, I'm excited to see the demo too.
Oh, yeah. So demo time. So what we are going to look in demo is we'll look into cost management, then smart views that are coming with the within that solution. We'll look at some customizable views. We'll look how you can analyze your spend by groups and tags, and as well as budget alerts. And part of these budget alerts, I'm also going to share the GitHub repo where you can actually automate your provisioning of budget alerts, so that you can use actual Bicep code to do that. So let's, without any overdue, let's dive into let me bring my Azure portal here. Is it visible for everyone? We change the screens
Yep,
here.
can see it.
Okay, great. So where I am now is like I have a couple of subscriptions. So this is one of the subscription where I am, and here we are looking at the cost, at the cost in a different way. So I'm looking at cost by service and then by resource type. But before diving into that, if you remember, I also talked about cost management. So cost management itself, if you go and type cost management in the search, you would get this, of course, you can go to the tutorials and look at some more information. And there's a preview, which, I didn't look into yet. But under this cost management, we have reporting and analysis. And under this section, this is really, I would say, really helpful cost analysis insights that you need to be aware about. Because here, when you go and click on that, it will give you different views of the same spend and value, which you may not be aware about. So here under the browse all views, if you go to that section, you will see that you have some smart views here where some Azure OpenAI can be infused in order to get some insights about your cost. If you want to just look at the view of your resources, meaning what are the resources in the environment that you are using, or services, that's the way to dive into them. Next here, you have customizable views, and this is something that you can customize based on the subscription or maybe even resource group where your workloads are running to get some deeper insights. And there are different ways, right? It's always depends what you are trying to get out of from numbers, right? It's not always about accumulated cost. Sometimes you want to deep dive into you know look at the maybe daily costs, maybe at the services that are utilizing that budget, and all other things. So here, let's for example look at accumulated costs, right? Let's start somewhere, and here it will give you some trajectory here, right? So there is some spend, and in this forecast, we don't have any groups. That's why it's kind of blank. But let's say you want to see your spend, and as you see here, from this, I have some spend on load balancers, virtual network, storage. There's a different categories, and by resource group name, they're also listed here. But this is, um, you want to deep dive into, maybe get more information about that. At that point, you can group this display, and you can go, for example, let's say you want to see by resource type, what type of resources are spending. And here's the thing, when you want to see actual, spend in a way that you can get idea, okay, every day how much I spend where, then you want to change these filters a little bit. And here, instead of forecast, maybe you want to look at daily charts. That's where you don't need to lose this site. You can go and click on this another tab, and then under all views, if you remember, we had this daily costs, right? So if you go and click on that daily cost, now all the costs will come on a daily way, so that each day you can see, each in this case the resource group name, how much your each resource group is utilizing. And resource group can be your workload name, right? The overall, where you have uh, all associated cloud resources that are needed for you to run that workloads. And here you can get this view. And then of course you can, this is by resource group name, but if you want to go and look by resource type, where you can identify, okay, what are the resources that are actually driving the cost, right? And at this point now you get more into, is it your load balancer, is it your public IP address spend, or is it maybe compute or disk that you have is actually costing you? So this is the kind of, I would say, very important view into that. Next here,
One thing I'd mention
yes,
there
yes, go
too,
ahead, please.
Elhan, is one of the key things we've seen is like after deployments, and you may be doing deployments multiple times a day.
Yes,
It's really important to look at the FinOps and set your triggers correctly because you may deploy it into an environment that's much larger than the environment you're testing in, and you'll
yes,
see a change in your FinOps and your infrastructure because you're deploying to a much larger environment. And this gives you great insight into being able to drill down and figure out, did you leave logging on? You may have had logging on in your lower level environments. You left it on in production and you want to
yes.
turn it off. So great insight and great ability to drill down on these things.
Yes, and in this case, I didn't select any budget, but if you have multiple budgets, you can, choose from these budgets. For example, I have this cost tracking budget, and here, from budget perspective, it's going to divide basically your budget per day. So it looks like if I'm staying under $5 per day, which is very minimal, but then I'm basically not following the budget. So this is another way to see, where I had the peaks, ups and downs. Unfortunately, this November and December months was very busy, so I didn't experiment too much. So as you see, I want to I deprovisioned most of the resources that I don't need, so I don't have any waste almost, right? So it's going a trajectory that's not going to bankrupt me, that's for sure. Another thing,
I
yes.
thought you were saving up for Christmas there
Yeah, that's an you
for the
see.
holiday.
I
Yeah.
forgot. You have to buy presents, right? You cannot.
Yes.
You have kids, you have family, you have friends, so you can't skip that. Yeah, that's. Yeah, I want to keep it as a secret, but you revealed my secret now. Okay, now let's look at experts. So in the experts, if you remember, we talked about APIs that you can schedule, to take your financial data from those APIs and export them maybe to some storage account or some external resources. That's, where you can do that. In addition to that, we talked about budgets, right? So here in this case, you see I have two budgets. The cost tracking budget has been there for longer than the demo budget. Demo budget, I created it just to test my scripts earlier this morning. So that's why you see there is no progress here, because it takes some time for this information to be tracked and visualized. But here for the existing cost tracking budget on 150, once you have the budget, you can always go and tune it up in a way that your business or you need to have visibility into that. In my case, for this budget, I have forecasted values that I want to get notified about, and I have actual values that where I also want to get notified. And this is good because sometimes you want to know things before it happened, right? You want to know before your budget hits 80% that you are on a trajectory that's it's going to hit 80%, but you are just 15 days in the month, meaning that half of the month is still there. So from that perspective, putting different, playing with these thresholds and making sure that putting the value that actually important for you is very valuable. And of course, you can go and edit that budget. And while you are editing that budget, you can change certain things. But I would say one of the things in the edit, you will see that you can set the alerts, the ones that I just showed. This is the place where you can set those actuals and forecasted value. And once this is in place, I want to also mention that you can customize your budget. You can create a number of budgets. It doesn't need to be one. And once you customize, it needs to have a purpose. For example, if you want to create a budget in a way that you want to, for example, through the tags, and it will, I have different tags. You want to, for example, get the tags on a cost center. It usually takes some time to get all of them. It's only one, but you want to see only the tags. You want to see your budget on the resources that have certain tags, like cost center on a. I should have R&D, but it's not coming. Let's say it's free, and then it's your view and everything is going to be changed. So, so this is another thing that you can adjust and customize that for your needs. All right, so that said, I wanna show you how you can actually provision a budget, right? Using the infrastructure as a code. That's another beauty of it. So here under demo budget, because still, not used that much, what you can do, you can, if you want to make some change, you can always go and delete that budget. That's also possible. So, and again, for a given subscription, you can have more than one budget based on the purpose that you are trying to track. Now, let's go to the Visual Studio Code. And before we jump into this Visual Studio Code, I want to show where you can get the code, and we are going to put the link in the, in the description part of the YouTube. So here, if I go to my browser, so if you go to the, this is my GitHub page here, and thank you everyone who is, following me here. Usually I have much more followers from the Azure Bicep sessions and infrastructure as a code that I'm providing. But here under the repositories, you can always go to FinOps in Azure. That's one of the new kids in the blog who has some, some code there. So here under Azure demo scripts, you can get some Azure CLI scripts. I'm also planning to put some PowerShell here in a different file. And then you have budget code. So here's the simple budget Bicep file. And I know that you can read and see it from here, but I'm going to switch to the Visual Studio Code so it's more convenient for you to see. So let me close this one and open the budget. And here's simple budget. So here basically, whenever you deal with the budgets, it needs to operate on a subscription as a scope. So that's why you have to define this target scope here. And then, of course, we define all the parameters that we need to have in place. Some of them have the default values, as you see here, and you can give the name. So here we have demo budget, right? That was a previous deployment. You can always say demo budget 02, for example. Okay, and then of course there are parameters that you need to set it up, and then you need to set it up the contact email address where you want to send it, and then there's some output. So to deploy this through the script, so you don't have to deal with UI or anything, you can go to this Azure demo scripts and then use this is the way how you can authenticate to your PowerShell. Then you need to select your subscription. In my case, it's already selected. And let's just, use the terminal here to make sure it's still up and running. So let me run this query now. So it's set correct. So next here, I want to make sure I'm able to list the resource groups. Okay, it's succeeded. And now using this file, simple budget Bicep, I want to deploy this new budget to my subscription, which is here, MVP-subscription. And while I'm deploying that, there are certain values that I'm setting here, but again, you can pass them through the parameters, but you want to make sure that you are pointing to the correct location where your Bicep file is located. So here, you are just going to, in order not to finger type that, I'm not going to type it from the beginning. I'm just going to clean the terminal and rerun it. So let's see, demo is the most kind of exciting part of it. It can go both ways, right?
Yeah,
It can work or it
you,
cannot work.
you always cross your fingers when you.
Yes. So some people, there are like different ways how people get prepared for that. I know some MVPs who are pre-recording that because even with Azure environment, sometimes you don't know what's happening there. You totally depend on third party, on a, I would say, on a way that how Azure portal is going to work at that point at that region, right? So if there's some outage or let's say, and okay, we have a success message here, so I'm not going to worry too much here. So we go back to our budget. As you remember, we deleted that here. So I'm going to say just refresh. Here we go. Demo budget 2 is provision. Of course, it'll take some time for progress. And you can customize it even further. So this was just small example, but that's not enough, because if you remember, we talked about metadata and governance and Azure policy. I mean, we need to make sure that when we have our resources, there is some type of automated inheritance from resource groups. Because if somebody wants to create the new resource, there are two ways how you can do that. You can either prevent them, from creating resource if they didn't put any tags, which is okay, but it's very restrictive and sometimes you get a lot of pushback. But the other one is that depending on how you report on the cost of your workloads, you can define pre-select tagging on the higher concepts like resource group or Azure subscription, and then make sure that whichever resource get created, they inherit those tags, so you can have easier way to slice and dice your spend. And
And
to
that's
see
huge.
that, yes, yeah,
That's
yes,
huge because, like you said,
hmm
automating that as much as possible is great, so that you
yes,
don't end up with things that are untagged out in your environment too.
correct. So I'll go to Azure policy. Unfortunately, we have to go to governance. So even though we don't like that word, but that's that word carries a lot of weight.
It
So we
it
go
does.
to assignment here. Yes, and we are in the assignment. And here's the thing, if you ever deal with policies, you need to be very patient, because once you create a new policy, it usually takes, at least I would say couple hours, so the policy get in effect and you see the how it's working. So when you deal with policies, I would just suggest to be patient. So here under, I'm selecting the same subscription, and as you see here, I have certain policies, and some of them say inherit a project tag from resource group, from cost center, make sure that you are using only North America locations, and environment tag. So what they do is basically, as the name says, they should help me to inherit tag from resource group if that tag exists, right? So if it doesn't exist, of course, it's not going to inherit anything. But to see that in action, right, we see that here it says, okay, owner tag, environment tag, project tag, cost center are going to be inherited. So let's say I'm one of those developers, right, that don't know about the policy, and I come and I look at all resources under my subscription, which is this MVP subscription. And then I see that, let me see, I don't have any, yeah, I have environment tag. So here uh, let me look at the edit columns. And here instead of, I want to make sure that I have all the tags, not just the environment. Okay, and then I want to move it a little bit up so I have enough real estate to see them. Here we go. Now we see the tags, and some of those resources have it, some don't, right? But let's take for example, this Linux virtual machine resource group where I'm running some Linux workloads. So here, if I look at the resource group itself, as you see, it has certain tags that are set up already. So it's about environment, cost center, owner, and project containers. So let's say I went and I want to create a new resource, and we are going to give it a tricky name here. Let's provision a resource that will take less amount of time to get provisioned, so it doesn't to take too much time on our end. I'm selecting storage account here, and then I'm just going to put the demo FinOps, and let's put today's date, 12/20/24, to make sure it's unique. There's certain way how you need to make sure you are compliant with the naming, otherwise it's not going to work. And yes, we want to keep the cost low, so you want to make sure it's locally redundant, at least on my case. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to make sure that you see that I'm not setting anything here. So tags are empty. We go to review and create. And it's going to be created in the resource group that has a parent tag, so to speak. And we are just going to provision it. It should take a couple of moments here, maybe 15, 20 seconds, but should be the fast way to provision. And while we are here, Jason, let me ask you questions, or maybe what do you think, how long it will take to provision a managed SQL database in Azure?
Uh,
And what I mean by managed, it's a managed SQL instance. Yeah, that's how they call it. It's not like SQL Server regular, but managed SQL database. Just give your wild guess. It involves networking and stuff like that, and plus there's some dedicated
networking
stuff.
too.
Yeah, it involves
Networking.
a lot of stuff.
Okay, let's go for 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
You are very generous. I mean, you are very optimistic. Sorry, not the generous. Actually, those instances, those SQL, managed instances, they
Okay.
take between 4 to 6 hours to provision. And the
Wow.
reason why it's because it has almost one-to-one compatibility with the SQL server that you are going to run on your on-prem in terms of
Okay.
capabilities. That's why it's like not just slice of the kind of SQL Server engine that Microsoft Azure is basically renting you as a service. It's more of a dedicated kind of cluster and dedicated network connectivity. So that's why it's much more expensive, and plus it takes time to provision. Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yes. So here we get this provision, right? That's awesome. Let's go to the resource. And this is the our storage account. And here we go. We didn't add any tags, but they are all added by default, right? So as you see, this is the resource, and we didn't add any tags, but they get inherited. So that's the power of the governance, Azure policy, and making sure that you are setting your customers on a success to get their, budget budget related reports on time, on schedule, without overhead. Okay, and speaking about that, what we can do here, Jason, I also want to show one more thing here. So if you go, there are different ways how you can access actual budgets and costs. Another way to do that is actually through the subscriptions. When you go to the subscriptions themselves, you can also have this cost analysis, cost alerts, budgets, almost the same things. And we also talked about Advisor, right? Azure Advisor. So whenever you click
Yeah.
on Azure Advisor, usually you will get some recommendations. So if there are any available, sometimes I don't get any. But yeah, Azure Advisor, we can type it here. The Azure Advisor will give you some cost recommendations. So as you see, we are pretty good on FinOps here. I see 100%, so nothing bad, but I need to do something with to look at these recommendations. So overall, cost-wise, we are doing great. But if I go back again to the subscription and we look into the cost analysis on the subscription, I want to show you here that how you can actually filter out based on the tags, because we told about tags, right? How they are useful metadata. And here in order to make sure that you can add that, you can go into the add filters. And here, let's do it daily cost. So it's more interactive, so to speak. And here in add filter, let's put the tags. All right. And here, let's go with environment. And then as you see, the values will get pre-populated for you. So let's look at the test, for example. So we don't have much spend on test, which is good. So let's see, do we have anything? And of course, I don't want to drive through each of them, but you can slice and dice based on different tags that you have. For example, here we looked at environment. You can go also with the cost center. So let's see if there is any value here. No, it's still getting calculated for other projects. So environment, we looked at the test, there wasn't much. Yeah, here you go. On the prod, we have different picture, but this is the value of it, right? So once you have the proper tagging strategy, you can get reports in a way that it serves your purpose, your customer purpose and mission, and you don't have to spend cycles getting this report prepared. All right, that's it.
So
Any
one
questions
thing,
on demo?
Elhan,
Yes.
one thing is, I know in the past,
Yes.
containers were an issue with FinOps too. Do you see
Mm-hmm.
any reason that you would have issues looking at containers as far as cost is concerned? And is there anything special people should know about that?
I think with containers, the special thing here is that there's auto scale, right? And putting the limits in auto scale in terms of how much you want to scale when the demand is up, that that's something that you need to have guardrails there, right, so to speak. So if you don't have guardrails on your resources that auto scale, that's a risk factor that either you need to sign off or your customer need to sign it off. So I believe that that's the biggest issue. But configuring your resource in a way that you basically have better management on auto scale should alleviate that issue. That's my understanding.
Yep, and that's what I've seen too, and especially and we talked about shared services before too, is if you have a cluster as far as your containerization is concerned too, is you got to figure out how to allocate out that cluster cost too, that overhead that's around the containers too. So that's where it becomes important also to make sure upfront you're defining how you're allocating those shared costs across the different teams that may be part of that cluster or maybe part of those containers too.
Yes, that's definitely. And speaking about shared, cost, I also want to make sure that when you drive, multiple workloads for your customer, you want to make sure that you have certain network structure, like we call it hub and spoke as a traditional way to go with. And under that spoke, under that hub, not the spoke, but hub, where you have the main connectivity, that's where shared services should be living, right? That's where they need to share the cost across the environment by providing the governance, security, and hopefully cost optimization in the shared for all these different workloads which are utilizing these, very central and important resources.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that
Mm-hmm.
that could be a whole another Christmas or
Different.
another
Yes.
holiday video on itself is how you share those resources. There's multiple ways of doing it. You can do percentage based, or you can do um, even spread of those
Yes.
resources, the shared resources. So that could be its own video on its own too.
Definitely, definitely, and it's another present box to unwrap and untangle and try to present each feature of the present that you are getting. Yes, definitely. So okay, let's wrap up our presentation today. What we covered today, we start with great introduction from Jason about why and what of FinOps, meaning that what it is and why you need that, and then we dived more into how you want to do FinOps in a way that it's standardized and it is valuable to you and your customers. And then we looked into some concepts in Azure that bring this FinOps practically into your customers, into your projects where you are working. And then we looked into some snippets of demo, how you can utilize that, how you can utilize automation to provision the budgets, and as well as different views and reports that can empower you by customizing them to see the value and workloads that you are trying to track. That said, we come to the end of the session. Thank you, everyone, for watching our session. Probably you are going to watch it through YouTube, but I want to give special thanks for Jason to agree to present this session with me because I didn't know what his reaction would be, being honest, but it went pretty well. I see he's smiling.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for making me part of it too. And I'm going to be watching out on the radar for Santa to see if he actually shows up because you made the promise at the beginning of the video. We got to carry it through. So,
Which brings an idea. Can we set an alert that can notify us, when he shows up? Can Azure budgets do that actually? That's a great feature that we need to recommend to Azure folk, right? If they
I like
really,
that.
okay, great. All right. We hope that you enjoyed this Festive Tech Calendar session today. Thank you, Jason, for being part of this
Yeah.
great presentation. Thank you for organizers and have a great holidays, everyone. Thank you. Bye.